Episode 11 features Max Schmarzo, where he detailed his unique approach he takes with the athletes that he trains now, especially the basketball athlete. He touched on his thoughts on what he describes as a holistic approach to development and how that drives the overall plan for what a specific player will need to maximize their skill on the court. We also discussed the business side of training, some of Max's ideas and thoughts on how to approach different ideas you might have as a coach, and how to use social media to drive those ideas. This podcast is available on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. So welcome back to the podcast. We're really excited about our next guest for today. His name is Max Schmarzo. A lot of you guys know him from Instagram. Strong by Science, that's his Instagram handle. We really appreciate you taking the time to come talk shop with us here on the podcast. Can you just give us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Of course. Yeah. Well, you guys got a dope setup here, by the way. I'm sure if your listeners have never seen it, they got this whole official deal with the microphones and a big screen TV. It's like a newscast. And I feel like I'm in like big media here, calling into like CNN or Fox or something. I'm like that guest reporter. So this is pretty cool. I'm watching myself on a big screen. It's the first time I've ever been on TV for probably a good reason. Right on. This is pretty dope. I train people. Like my background is what it is. It's kind of, some people like to hear it. I'll keep it short. I went to school, played basketball, did a lot of schooling, got a graduate degree, and now I train a lot of athletes, more basketball players. And that's kind of the short story, I guess. My background doesn't have anything cool to it, so I could make up some stuff like, I'm adventurous and I travel places and I like to go outdoors, but like neither of those are true. So I'll leave it very nebulous so you guys can kind of make up what you think I'm like as you listen. And hopefully you paint a cooler picture than I would, because it'd be pretty mundane. But yeah, I train people out in Iowa, and we take several individual clients in the off season for basketball and some soccer here and there remotely. Steve Clark is a good friend of mine. So I don't call him a good friend, but a friend of mine who I train, a good training friend, however you qualify that. Good guy. So that's my soccer connection, goalies, which is kind of fitting because it is actually similar to a lot of basketball movements, just in a more controlled manner. No midfielders or anything like that. And so that's where I'm at, middle of Bettendorf, Iowa.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, I listened to a podcast with Ben Bruno, and one of his comments was a lot of the times where you live is going to dictate the clientele that you get. You live in Iowa. How do you balance that? And is that, you think that's from your social media following, from relationships that you've had? Like, how do you get guys to go there? Are they locals of Iowa, or are they coming there, just to have an experience with you, train? I know I've listened to you before. They live with you, they stay, like all that kind of stuff. How have you navigated that to where you have, high level athletes coming to Iowa to train?
Yeah, that's a good question. There aren't many distractions in Iowa. I guess we have a casino. It's down the street, kind of older people playing the slots. It's not like the most exciting thing in the world. So it's kind of a getaway. A lot of people who I work with are people who have an opportunity to make life-changing money. They haven't made it yet. And they understand that I'm an investment and they're putting in that time. And so it doesn't really matter if I was on the moon. I think they'd show up. Obviously, being in Iowa, you're more inclined to Midwest localized region, just because word of mouth. For example, I worked with Reed Travis, who plays overseas right now in Japan. But he was at Kentucky and Stanford, and I met him while I was at Stanford. And then lo and behold, he was going to meet with me in Denver, and then I ended up moving out here. He came out, bunkered down, and put in a lot of work and made a lot of progress and doing really well, making good money in Japan. And so anytime you can make money, that's exciting, especially playing a game. But he really enjoyed what he did with me, and he felt like he got better. And then AJ Green, who plays for the Bucks right now, his dad had recruited the Midwest area and kind of bumped into Reed's coach or someone affiliated with Reed, and they spoke highly of myself. And so that kind of connection kind of came about, where I worked with AJ when he was at University of Northern Iowa, 2-time Larry Bird Player of the Year. Guy's kind of a dog, but I was able to take him out of his rehab from hip surgery. He had, his hip surgery is going into would be technically his junior year. And they gave me all the training. So I trained him in season. Like I trained him throughout nonstop his whole UNI. And Coach Jacobson came out to the house, made sure everything was what he liked. And these guys trusted me. And so then AJ's done very well. He's doing well with the Bucks. I think he's leading all rookies in 3-point percentage. All-star snub for the 3-point contest, but that's okay. I'll give him that plug. And so then we have like Chasen Randalls from the area, and Chasen's right now in the G League, but he played with the Magic. And then Ethan Happ, you guys might know from Wisconsin. He's out in the area as well. And so it just starts to grow. And if you do a good job, I tell my players, look, like you pay me to make you more money. That's the relationship between you and I when you're a professional athlete. If you're a housewife and you want to lose weight, then you pay me to help you lose weight. But I'm not paid to help them be weight room superstars. I'm not paid to help them build bigger biceps like I might want to do for myself. They pay me to make them better at basketball. And at times training is part of that, but it's much more of a holistic approach beyond just, lifting weights. For example, Ethan was in town. He flew in he's in Spain right now, top tier. And he's in town. He's like, hey, can I get a workout in? I was like, dude, what? Like, of course. Yeah, absolutely. He's like, well, I'm back in town for 3 days. I was like, dude, just come over and play Call of Duty. Like, what's one workout going to do? Yeah, I mean, like, you're just going to be tired for your flight tomorrow. And if anything, I'm going to load you not knowing how you've been loaded the past month. So he just came over and we played Call of Duty Zombies for an hour and a half. That's what we did.
That's perfect.
And so that's kind of how I operate here for the personal in-person kind of stuff. And so obviously, yeah, you guys have beautiful palm trees and you probably have more athletes in your area. Look at that setup. My goodness. Looks like some sort of beach getaway. You guys out here living in the Caribbean or something. Oh my gosh, I got a sump pump over here pumping out water from the rain, and you guys are over here smoking Cubans and hanging your toes in the sand. Good for y'all. But yeah, that's kind of my setup here, and that's kind of where my training mindset, I guess, my training concepts come from, where the hell you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, to dive in a little bit of your training, and I listened to you talk about it. I forget where now, but I listened to it. I thought it was a really good concept and how you approach. You're a professional athlete. Like you do get paid to train, and I heard you break down how some of your guys might come in the morning, have breakfast, work out for 20 minutes, and then hang out, play some Call of Duty, work out again later on, and then maybe go to the court. So to dive a little bit into your, training philosophy and how you got to that point is just, maybe break down a little bit of what that looks like and maybe the why behind you do that versus, the typical like train for an hour and a half and then you're done for the day.
Yeah. And there's nothing against that. Like I get it. People have numbers and they got to get through clients and you got to have schedules. You can't just have people chronically just lingering in a facility. If you got 30 people or 40 people or 200 people in your facility, it can't be this like chronic a la carte situation. Part of it came about where these guys, like they fly here. And so I was like, well, we have all day. Like, what would I do if I had all day to train? I certainly wouldn't train in a way that I'd be tired after an hour and a half and then just spend the rest of my day like lumbering through fatigue. And so all I sat down and thought about was, how can I get the most done at the highest return of per effort, both in a single day, over a week, and over, the off season? And then you sit down and look at it. And I always think about, what am I doing that's wasting time and effort? Some of the wasted time and effort is you trying to recover from something that you imposed upon yourself so artificially. And so this was kind of like an idea churning in my head. And I didn't really know how to put it into words. And then I thought, like, evolutionarily speaking, or even just like if you're working on a farm, you wouldn't just try and like hay bale all your hays. And if you're not sure hay bale hays, but you get the idea. In like 30 minutes and like an allotted time. You wouldn't try to sprint a mountain climb. You would just go at a pace that you could consistently do at a good output. And so, like, evolutionarily speaking, like, when would we ever in life evolutionarily be charged with a task, with a time constraint of an hour and a half, 90 minutes imposed upon us at such a high work effort yield. Like, what's chasing us for an hour and a half? What are we enduring for an hour and a half? And so it never made sense to me. I understand why it exists. And if you think about it like that, you say, okay, well, that's my hypothesis. It was never meant to be this way. So then why does it currently exist that way? And you just look at it and it's like, because of school. Like, kids have school from 9 to 5, whatever nowadays, 9 to 3 or 8 to 3. Okay, so I only have so much time, so we just crank out whatever. And so we put like a 60-minute number on it because it's easy to manage. And I was like, well, when I lift, I don't like say it's 60 minutes are up. Like, I'm done. Yay. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm tired and like 15 minutes, and some days I feel great. And so then I was like, okay, well, let's remove these constraints and start to break down logically, does this make any sense? And in my head, I said, no, this doesn't make any sense at all. This is just a huge amount of workload imposed upon us. If you look at the research too, there is some good science behind it. Like, I have to say, like roughly 40 minutes in, if you're looking at aerobic activity, you start to see like an exponential increase in metabolic tissue damage, or things like cortisol, things like adrenal load, things of anything, or it looks like creatine kinase. You start to see a high level of fatigue buildup, and you also see a corollary high level of exertion. So it's not just the actual metabolic loading, but per metabolic load that you increase upon your body doesn't want metabolic load. It doesn't make any sense evolutionarily why you'd want to just impose workouts upon yourself. There's a reason why if we sit around and eat all day, we get fat. Like, that's what the body wants to do. It's very happy doing that. So if I just impose a huge amount of metabolic load, you have internal, and we're called interoceptive, your feedback system from internalizing your body, where you have to overcome that want to not do it. So I'm sure you guys have been in a workout before, and you're like, let's say 30 minutes in, and you go, oh, I got those last 3 exercises I got to do. Oh gosh, those 3 exercises take up so much more mental effort than the previous 30 minutes of work. And so, yeah, you have the metabolic aspect, but the metabolic aspect is going to signal something in the central nervous system to tell you to downregulate. And you're constantly fighting this downregulation. All right, let's get the last set of calves in, or the sideline groin and all this stuff. So when you look at it in that nature, you say, okay, well, how can we do the workout we want to do and not have to have this excessive fatigue? Well, if it's metabolic load, part of that is nutrient depletion. You can start to map out and say, well, per 30 minutes, I want a meal. I want a meal between every workout. I want, if it's 15 minutes, I want at least an hour completed. So we'll say 45 minutes of rest. If it's an hour-long workout, we're going to take at least an hour and a half to 2 hours. It's almost a 2.5 to 2 ratio. And then we just map out our day that way. So a day's pretty simple. We have breakfast in the morning at 8 a.m., 8:30. We'll work out and we'll do whatever. It kind of fits in the skills framework. So if you have certain skills you need to get done that day, like you get paid to play basketball. So you prioritize what's going to make you the most money. Is it working on my jump shot? Is it going to be, for some big minutes, physical activity, athleticism? You know, Kenneth Reed doesn't need to work on his jump shot. Kenneth Reed made a lot of money grabbing a lot of rebounds. There's a lot of players who don't. I just pulled up some stuff we'll talk about in a second, I guess, too. But knowing your role is really important. So if you have an ill-defined role, you're going to have an ill-defined plan as a player, especially the professional athlete, because you'll be so caught up in trying to do everything, you'll essentially make progress and nothing. So when you define your role and your 1 to 3 rate limiting skills, and you have a skills day dedicated to those 1 to 3 skills, you can then map out certain workouts that won't interfere with that. So if I'm working on obtuse shooting or movement-based shooting, whatever we're going to call it, anytime you have a high-speed DHO, that's going to require a rapid deceleration. And we're also working in tandem that day, some defensive recovery stuff. Okay, well, during that skills workout, I'm not going to do explosive finishing. I'm going to take that and use that as my plyo session. So in the morning, we're going to do I know enough about basketball. I can tell you how to do explosive finishing pretty easily. And that's a training session. That is a plyometric training session that's labeled, skills/plyos, but that will be your first 30, 35-minute workout. Then you might have your priority workout, which is at 1 p.m., and you're going to do your shooting, your certain kind of X, Y, and Z work. And then maybe you have at the end of the day some hypertrophy work because you need to add some muscle mass, but we'll save that to the last workout at the end of the day. That'll be 20 to 15 minutes of select muscle groups that you need to add muscle mass to. During the whole time, we recommend meet with a registered dietitian, make sure you get enough food. I've cooked more pancakes than I ever thought I would cook in my entire life. Constantly eating, rather have someone gain a little weight in the off season than lose a little weight more times than not. Anytime you're operating in a caloric deficit and we're trying to make progress, what are we trying to do here? I'd rather have you lose a little weight as you progress into training camp than try and lose weight now. So then by the time you get to training camp, you have no buffer and you spent the whole off season being loaded from two ends of the spectrum, both a caloric deficit and high intensity workouts. You're trying to adapt in the off season. You're preparing your body for what you have to do. So that's kind of the structure of the workouts. If that makes any sense. I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, but it's kind of different to explain if you aren't here. So I'm trying to do my best to give the most details possible.
No, I mean, I think you've explained it well. I mean, I think you're breaking down and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that you're breaking down a normal training session that you do in an hour and a half, and you're just breaking it up within 2 sessions, 3 sessions, whatever you see fit. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Kind of, but there's also some consideration I've had recently in terms of utility of exercises. So if you look at a training session, I don't know who listens to this specifically, but we look at, we're going to do 9 different exercises in the weight room today. We're going to do, here's a very classic example of me in college basketball world. We're going to do box jumps, and then we're going to do a shrug pull, and then we'll do a lower body compound power, a strength movement, like a back squat. And then we'll do a single leg stability RDL. And then we'll do a single leg quad dominant one. And then we'll do an ankle series, and then we'll do a glute series, and we'll do our Copenhagen groin, and then we'll do whatever. And at a certain point in time, do I really need to do 9 exercises? Or can I just, what percentage of this outcome of this pie of exercises is actually responsible for my progress? And I'd argue probably about 3 of those 9 exercises actually matter. If I never did an ankle series again in my life, I probably am not running a risk of much, unless that person has some preconditioned issues where the ankles are really needed to be targeted. Because this guy's going to go play basketball. Am I really going to pretend my 7 sets of whatever balance series on an ankle is going to be that much more effective than this guy playing the next 2 hours of basketball, changing direction? The relative loading makes no sense. Because I know I only have my guys for so much time. I just really want to emphasize those target things, those emphases that we think are going to have the highest yield. So there's been days we just do like a trap bar jump. We'll put a velo tracker on it. We'll do 30 reps, 30 sets of 1 rep, and we just track. And that's the whole workout. Do I really need to do anything more? And so by the time you start peeling stuff back, it's very easy to add stuff back in. What's difficult is I put all this stuff on an athlete, and then they want to do all this stuff on their own. And next thing you know, they've trained for 7 hours that day, and they come back tomorrow, and we're just meeting baseline over and over again. Versus really trying to think about this don't think about the weight room as the weight room in the way us meatheads think about it, because we like it. We have fun in the weight room. We like dumbbell side raises, and we're sick animals and do isometric lunges and weird things most people shouldn't do, and we deadlift too often. Okay, that's fun for us, but we also don't have court work for 3.5 hours today too. So let's start with the athlete. Let's think about the weight room as a supplement to their skills. If an athlete is trying to accomplish something, it always comes from their skill set. Some athletes don't need to work out. It's just the fact of the matter. Some guys just don't have to really work out. They're very good basketball players and they make a lot of money. Some guys need to. And so the weight room, this is a basketball conversation. If you look at basketball as a whole, if you look at a player's value is only developed in 2 areas. It's skills, or it's physical training that allow for new skills to be utilized. Again, everything coming back to skills. The coach is an extraction element. So you're putting together a formula. Certain coaches might extract more out of a player than another. You could talk about, is it Nace Highsmith for the Pacers right now? He's playing very well when he didn't perform as well with is it Naismith or Highsmith? There's one for the Heat, one for the Naismith. Thank you. Shooter. Yeah. Vanderbilt. He played at Boston, didn't do as well, but now he's the Pacers doing great. Do you think he really got better at basketball in a month? Or is it a coach extracting value out of him more? He's getting a higher extraction yield. Okay. How about Kelly Olynyk when he was at Gonzaga? Kelly Olynyk at Gonzaga actually redshirted after his sophomore year because he didn't think he was good enough. Comes back as an All-American. So he sat down and said, it's not an extraction issue. It's a actual value issue as a player. My skills are lacking. And he decided to develop his skills and his physical attributes that support those skills to become an All-American. And so you start to understand how value is created. Then you can say, okay, Mr. Basketball player, you want to make more money. Money is a relationship to how the market values you. How can we increase your value? What specific skills and attributes can you develop to make you a better player? Because in theory, there's infinitesimal number of things you can do. I suck at a left-hand floater. I could work on left-hand floaters all day. Am I going to shoot one? So it always comes back to the player. And it's different per player. Ishmael Wainwright just converted his contract with the Suns, I believe. He's a 2-year, $2.5 million. He's a two-way, he's 28 years old. I pulled up his advanced analytics today, and he shot one pull-up jump shot the entire year, 10 feet away, and has missed it. One pull-up jump shot. That's all. And I think 100, gosh, what number is it? I want to say it's 78% of all of his made threes are assisted on. He basically just shoots threes and cuts the hoop. Cool. Guess what? $2.5 million is more money than majority of anyone's ever going to make. So if I can take a player who's on a two-way and get them to sign a $2.5 million contract, that's a 5x increase in their value, and that's going to change their life forever. So often we get caught up in, oh, what's John Morant doing? What skills is he doing? And Paul George or whoever it might be, these guys signing, $150 million contracts. Cool. If you're Paul George or John Morant, you'd already be having lots of success in the NBA. We're not here to try and squeak out every inch of value versus maintain someone's physical ability at that point so they can keep raking in the dough and performing well. But if we're someone else who's on that verge and that cusp, you really got to look at what's going to make you better. Larry Nance Jr. had an interesting podcast on that. And this is something I've talked about with Reed is he was like, look, I don't shoot step back jump shots. I don't practice them. He's like, when would I shoot a step back jump shot? If I shot one, I'm in trouble, or it's late clock and no one cares anyway. So when we're in our skills stuff, I go to their skills training and we watch stuff and I say, look, why are you shooting a step back jump shot? If you're in the NBA, you're not shooting a step back jump shot. And if you are shooting a step back jump shot and you're okay to do that, you're already making a boatload of money. So who cares? Like we've already done a lot of good. I had a conversation with my players talking about like it's a DHO, dribble handoff, and the player comes off and like, oh, what if I get blocked from behind on this DHO? I said, that's great. You've shot and made so many dribble handoff pull-ups that they are now actively contesting from behind. You're doing a really good job. We'll hurdle that obstacle when we get there. For now, let's just try and find the ways that we can succeed within the environment that you're in. And so that's kind of the biggest cornerstone to all this discussion we might have today is that it's all about the basketball player. I'm in a very hyper-specific focused position. And so when someone hears, oh, should I do a lunge or should I do that? Should I do this? I mean, that's all great and fine and dandy. But when we're talking about an athlete, it's always centrated around the athlete. And I always ask the athlete, look, you're here, you pay me. What do you want me to help you do? And that's a conversation that we need to honestly have with them. Because if they can't define what they're trying to develop and what their skills are, then I'm just literally guessing in the weight room what they need. Because you're a pro, dude. Like you should know what you need to do. And then I'm your Google search engine. I'm your resource. You don't go to the doctor and be like, hey, what's wrong with me? You go, dude, like I got this thing on my elbow. Can you help me? Can you help me get rid of this thing? They're like, yeah, sure. Like I can go to my thing in that elbow book and figure out what resources and creams or whatever you need to apply to it. If an athlete just showed to me and is like, make me better at basketball. I'm like, shouldn't you know that? Like, don't you know what you need to be better at? And if you can't answer that, then it's not going to be a good fit with you and me.
Yeah. And I think you touched a lot on there is, a huge piece is looking at the human first and understanding what they need for their sport in order to be successful. Because that's really at the end of the day, what we're trying to do. Like we're not trying to make you weight room freaks or lift the heaviest weight. We're trying to make you better at basketball. I know looking through some of your stuff and where you've been before is when you do get a guy in and you have these conversations, what are you doing in the weight room side as how are you analyzing them? Are you still using force plates, force velocity profiling, that stuff? Or are you more looking at just, hey, this is what you need and I kind of already know how I can get you there?
It's more like, what do you need? And then what will help me get a better idea of how to accomplish that goal? So sometimes it's a force plate. Sometimes it's force velocity profiling. Sometimes it's just teaching them how to lift a trap bar appropriately or like get it into a decent lunge position because that's going to make the highest yield for them. And then based on that conversation, we can adjust things. So someone like Reed Travis, I could put all the weight in the world on that bar, and you guys don't know who Reed is. You guys can Google him for listeners. He's gigantic in college. He's gotten much leaner. But I've had a half squat, pen squat, a little above parallel with him once. And I just kept putting weight on the bar and he kept lifting it. I was like, well, okay, this clearly doesn't need to get any better. And I was like, well, duh, this is pretty obvious because nothing about your game lacks strength. It's always a movement situation. Can I move laterally? Can my hips flip? Can I play proper drop coverage defense on a pick and roll? Can I switch onto a guard and not be a liability to get blown by? Can I positionally rotate an X out of certain positions and be active on the defensive glass? I'll make a corner three. That would make you a lot of money in the NBA. Ishmael Wainwright just proved that, by the way. So that's how we start. And then sometimes we go into force velocity profiling. With AJ, he had to go do the G League combine and vert and stuff. And so we did a lot of force velocity profiling because he's going to get tested on whether or not he jumps high. He got second highest vertical in the G League combine. Hooray, high five, good job. But the whole point of that is that's the obstacle we have to cover right now. Does it really make him a better basketball player if he can jump the second highest in a G League combine? No. But if he jumped last, it'd be a rate limiting factor for teams not want to get him, right? Oh, he's a shooter. He's unathletic. He can't jump. Oh, we can't. He's going to be a liability on whatever. Okay, he jumps the second highest, and it's like, oh, sneaky athlete, right? Like those classic terms. And so for him, yeah, we do force velocity profiling for that aspect. But then when that game came and went, we sat down and reappraised the situation and looked at what we needed to do in terms of defense, in terms of offense, and certain positional stuff. So we've done work all the way from using, was it Noah's Ark shot tracker? What's the little camera you could place? Not Noah's Ark. That was when I played. It was called Noah's Ark, but it's like a little end court thing. I forgot what it's called, but it tracks the arc of your shot. We'll go through things like that. We're looking at your shot and off of different movement patterns where you can find certain aspects where it's like, oh, I'm losing position at this speed. So it's kind of like a force velocity profiling, but applied in the sport situation. Or someone like Reed, who's working on movement, can we work on a steepness of curve to speed relationship? And so all these things are all derived from essentially basic physics applied into a pattern that you care to assess. So force velocity profiling, for anyone who's not aware, you just take a weight, you move it at different loads, different speeds, and you look at the relative outputs in a vertical pattern. And you say, okay, like there's a linear relationship. You might move really heavy weights, really well, but you suck at light weights. Cool. That same concept of Newtonian loading, i.e. a speed running straight ahead, and then the ability per angle of turn to measure the decrement, because per angle of turn, essentially you can then like graph on an XY coordinate to say, look, this is when we turn right, we lose speed, or left, we turn speed, lose speed. You can then begin to like appraise how someone can handle certain change of direction at a constant rate of entry on a speed. Now, do you need to be that nerdy, or can you have someone run straight ahead, run a little bit to the left and a little bit, and then really to the left, and you can see how much they drop off and then do it that way? Sure. But it's the same applied Newtonian principles of running fast, having some momentum, and then having to convert that momentum with a specific angle that can be, essentially measured if you care for it, or just eyeballed if you don't want to do that. So it's up to, kind of like a convoluted answer. Like, what do you do, Max? Well, here's a bunch of things I kind of do, and didn't give you guys anything straightforward. But it's just kind of applied principles. We get so caught up in this rigid, oh, the hands have to be on the hips during the jump, or we have to do, you have to have your arm swing this way during that, versus really taking the principles of what the science actually looked at and then applying the principles to your environment, and then making decisions based on certain hypotheses that you have put together, and then constantly reassess those hypotheses, whether or not they're accurate. If that makes some sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. And when you look at it in that sense from more of a global, holistic perspective, it makes, training outside of the basketball court a lot simpler. As opposed to, like you said, okay, here's a list of 14 exercises we have to do 3 times a week, right? Or if we don't do that, you're not developing the weight room. Well, if you're a basketball player, you don't necessarily need to do this list of 14 exercises like you mentioned. I guess my next question would be,
if you do see a guy who is quote unquote movement deficient, like you mentioned, what are some things that you would do outside of the court to work on his movement, to work on his speed, to work on other things that are more general in nature?
Yeah, of course. But before I go, ask me that question at the end, because I have a little listeners who are listening. You might be just like, who the hell is this guy rambling about weird shit? It's kind of a fun experiment. It's easy to break down the way I'm kind of talking around a situation of thought process. So I'm assuming Lucas and Jared, you guys like pizza. I like pizza as well. But everyone
Yes.
kind of, okay, good. I assume the listeners can probably like pizza as well. Like what defines a good pizza is very different for everybody. I watched Dave Portnoy eat pizza, and he likes a pizza that's very firm, that has no flop, and it's thin, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I like maybe the cheese more so. My wife really likes the pasta, pizza sauce, whatever. And you guys might like certain things as well. So you can categorize all the variables in a pizza, such as thickness, the crust type, is there cornmeal in the bottom, the cheese, the sauce, the crispiness. And so you have, let's say, 7 variables. But for each person, those variables are weighted differently. If you say the sum of it is all 1, your formula, my formula, anyone else's formula, well, for me, the cheese might make up 90% of all things that I care about. So I can have a really crappy dough, but if I like the cheese, it's going to carry a lot of weight into the success of that pizza. While someone else, Lucas, maybe you like, I don't know, a stuffed crust pizza a lot, and you don't really care how any of the toppings are, anything like that. As long as that crust is stuffed, you think that's a really good pizza. And Jared, you might like one, regardless of how it even tastes, you just care if it's thin and crispy. And so we're all trying to eat a pizza here, but how we judge whether or not a pizza is good is based on initial hypothesis or model framework that we have put together, and we've weighted those variables. And so that same thought process about how you like a pizza is the same way you train somebody, ironically. You lay out all the variables that you can do. We could do all the stuff in the weight room. We could do all the stuff on the field, on the court. But you have a hypothesis saying, I think that these certain variables are weighted to a higher degree. If I think this person's a 3-and-D kind of player, then I know their ability to shoot 3-pointers is a hugely high weighted variable. I could get this guy to be the fastest human in the world, as fast as Usain Bolt. If he shoots 32% from the 3-point line, we're not going to be any better at basketball. We need to shoot at 38% clip. And so you have a whole bunch of variables that are weighted to determine your success. And so when you ask about, for someone's movement's a very general aspect. Within that movement profile, there's certain things that you can weight differently. And you say, I think someone's lateral movement is a big reason for their lack of success on the court, or I think someone's sprint ability or someone's whatever. And then within that, you have a sub framework to say, well, what muscles and things are responsible for that? An example is Reed Travis, who you guys might have seen. If you've looked at my post law stuff on Instagram, we have him, and he's typically a larger guy. He's 6'8" with a 7'1" wingspan and weighs 260. Dude's a tank. He's like 4% body fat. For him, it's his hip flexors, because his ability to get his feet up and down tend to be a huge issue. And people say, they look at is his quick feet able to move? Why is that important, Max? Speed ladder drills are stupid. Well, if you've ever seen anyone hedge a ball screen or play drop coverage defense, you realize they got to pick their feet up and put them down quite a bit. So understanding the game that you're actually training for, and you realize, okay, this athlete has this deficiency potentially, and we're going to train to fix that deficiency by working on hip flexor speed. We're going to work on keeping a low center of mass. We're going to work on having an ability to have some sustainment in our quads to maintain that semi-crouched isometric position where we're working on weak side. Then you start to have this hypothesis model, and we talk to each other and say, hey, we think this is why you're not moving as well on defense as you'd like. Does this reflect how you feel? And they might say things like, I feel stuck sometimes. Very common word you hear a lot of basketball players. I feel stuck. Okay, that means nothing to me. Let's talk about what that means. Well, I'm stuck when I'm in this position here, and when I do this, and you film them and you say, okay, look, when you do a hip flip, you're actually lifting and then turning versus sinking into your hip flip. And then your next step out of that, you're doing this giant leg lift versus actually keeping a low shuffle. And he goes, well, I was always taught to do this big high knee drive. And I said, that's cool if you run sprints, but you don't run sprints. You play basketball. I need your foot actually relatively close to the ground when you play basketball, because for every inch it's above the ground is an inch it has to go back to the ground before you can plant it and move again. If you've ever seen any good basketball player, watch Kyrie Irving take it to the hoop, or anyone play defense, no one's high knee in the place. They just are really low to the ground. And so you start to assess how a body moves, and you run that as a corollary. Your hypothesis is, I think, the hip flexors and this stuff based on a lot of the film I've watched them play. And you ask them, does that make sense? Is that actually how you feel? And then we do a lot of the drills. And if we're replicating some of those positions where we feel stuck in, then we know we're kind of on the right path, because movement is so diverse. We love to have people just sprint, or we love to have people run upright in these great postures. And then we realize you dribble a basketball, you'll hit the basketball. If you run with high knees, you can't dribble. You can't run with high knees with the basketball.
Right.
And so it's just like, really understand your sport, then really understand the positions they get in. And then within that, you're going to make some assumptions about, I think this is probably why. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be right. But if you have a model of assumptions, you can then go back and recalibrate those assumptions and think about them again and say, well, do we think that was right? Does this feel right? Do we on the right path? Are the movements that we've been working on, is it actually carrying over? And so in our drills, they will play defense against me. Some days when we're working on lateral movement, it's straight one-on-one, and it's disadvantage one-on-one. They have to corral me. So it's not just, in the weight room, we're shuffling around and doing some stuff. No, we're getting our asses on the court, and I'm dribbling a basketball, and that's our lateral change of direction day. That is as lateral change of direction as it can get. And we talk about some of the positions we're in and some of the things we don't like and do like. And you'll see weird stuff that we do on Instagram, where one of the things is work on defensive hip flips. And you could have someone do a defensive hip flip till the cows come home. And when they're sitting there, they'll do it perfect. But the minute you do it in a game, they're going to lift uprights. So what do? Well, let's take basketball out of the situation for a second. These guys love basketball. They always want to win in basketball. They want to compete in basketball. And they're going to cheat their bodies to make sure they beat me. Okay, well, I don't care about if they beat me at basketball. I'm not very good at basketball. I hope you beat me every time. So let's play a sport where we're not associated with basketball. So we have them stand 5 feet, 10 feet in front of me, and I take a Frisbee and I throw it. And they got to drop, sink their hips, and flip and go catch the Frisbee. So now they're no longer associating that movement pattern with trying to stop me from scoring, because they're going to be egotistical and not going to let me score. So they're going to wall up way earlier than they should and stop me from scoring, because guess what? I'm not as fast as, John Wall, Kyrie Irving, whoever you want to name. Cool. But that's not going to work in the league when it's not me going against you guys. And so you have to understand as a coach, what are some of the mental aspects people associate with the drill? If you're going to just cheat the drill to win, then we're not going to be doing much good. And so, for example, like a hip flip one, we'll throw a Frisbee over their head. The minute it gets above their head, they got to turn, flip the hips. What's nice about that, when they're tracking a Frisbee, they'll stay low because they're tracking and looking. They have variable movement patterns, and you can just film it and look whether or not that's the movement pattern you actually want to see. And so that's kind of how we get to some of the games that you see maybe on social media, and someone's like, Max, I'm just throwing Frisbees around. What the hell is this? Playing with balloons. It's so stupid. But really, it's because I'm trying to find something that actually works on a pattern, and then we find the game that fits it, and whether or not that pattern is the rate limiting factor in that game. So if their ability to drop their hips and flip is going to be determining whether or not they're successful at catching the Frisbee, then that's going to be a really good drill at training the hip flip, because the better they get at hip flips, the better they'll catch a Frisbee.
And you know what I like about that is it's really just limited to the creativity of the coach, right? And just and finding ways to be analytical about the movement pattern. And then, like you said, figuring out, is this close enough to the movement pattern that they'll see in a game? And then trying to manipulate the variables and create constraints that develop that, that improvement or that adaptation, if you want to call it that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's always unknowns. I'm kind of a weird nerd, I guess. Probably can figure that out by now. And I like to think about things analytically. And so you never know if you have the right exercise, right? We just don't know. Is this the right one? Is this the one that's going to make the difference? We can make some assumptions that if they've been doing these other exercises for 2 years and they haven't got any better at the movement pattern, it's probably not the right exercise.
Right.
And so I'm willing to take an umbrella approach. Like if you're this is not financial advice, but if you're like investing in something and you want to invest, say, in the energy sector, you're going to diversify your portfolio to have risk mitigation. You're not going to just put probably all your money into Chevron, my guess is, because if something comes up where Chevron's been fudging the books, well, all your money's gone. You'll diversify it across the entire energy sector, maybe different types of energy. Chevron, BP, you might do solar, natural gas, and so on. Cool. Well, that's the same thing we do with exercise selection. I pick a umbrella quality I want to train. And I say, well, is this the right exercise or is that the right exercise? I'm not going to invest all my eggs in the one basket. I'm probably going to do a risk mitigation, because essentially these exercises are probably somewhat related to each other. They have what's called like a tight corollary. Their beta operates synergistically. So when one goes up, they all go up. And so cool. If I know there's not like a huge difference between them, but I know if I do one and just only one, I could possibly be picking the one only wrong one, then I'm going to pick maybe 5 of these exercises that we're going to do. We're going to rotate them. And then with that, we have some level of risk mitigation against one of these not being the right exercise, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And, to play devil's advocate a little bit, it's a fine line because, like you said, on one hand, you don't want to choose too many. And on the other hand, you don't want to choose the wrong one. So you got to be creative and intuitive about what you choose to have your athlete do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can get away. I think naturally there's a more generality with anything in the weight room. I think you could sit here and argue like, oh, should I squat? Should I lunge? Should I split squat? Should I do this? Should I do that? Well, at the end of the day, you're doing that exercise to work a muscle group. Typically, no one's doing a back squat to work the back squat pattern. I'd imagine as an athlete, you're using that exercise to train your quads and your glutes. So as long as your hypothesis isn't surrounded in that case around an exercise, but surrounded around muscles being worked. So in that case, it's much easier to understand whether or not that exercise is actually working those muscles. There's only so many muscles you can do. The tricky part is when you start to think about movement pattern, like the nervous system, that's where you start to have some weird, huge factorial aspects to it. Is it reactive? Are they reading the right cues? Are they actually positioning themselves appropriately? Are they timing themselves right for all the movements? And so it becomes hugely multifactorial anytime we have a motor skill acquisition. But when it's just purely motor potential, working the right muscles and legs and so on and so forth, the exercise selection in the weight room, whether you pick one of 9 different exercises, only just pick one, there probably isn't going to be a huge issue. Because I think the biggest issue with any exercise for most athletes is just comfort, consistency, and the ability to load it. In the weight room, I'm talking about like traditional big compound movements. But then some of the other stuff you might get more minor with. But it's always typically going back to a muscle more times than not, even though we don't like to say that, but it's probably true.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I saw, working with a couple of NBA guys from the movement perspective is that a lot of these guys have played basketball for their entire life, six years old, whatever. And just by doing what you said, I've seen some stuff with the balloons that you do, the change of direction, hitting it in the air, the frisbee, the hip flip. You're working on things that when you do watch film, they don't get. Because like you said, a lot of the athletes I've worked with are crazy competitive and do have an ego and are they going to do what makes them successful? And I've seen by just putting them in different situations, working on qualities, but making it, gamify it, make it intentful, make it a competition, just by getting them to move in different patterns, different planes of motion, actually allows their athleticism or opens up, doors to greater things by just by giving them some of that. Because a lot of these guys, I'm sure some of the guys you've worked with, AJ, the shooter that you have in the Bucks, like I'm sure he's moved the same way for 12 years. And Reed, same thing. Like you got to try to get them to move in different ways, and you'll see their athleticism go up. Have you seen that by just doing some of those things?
Yeah, and so that's twofold in that. So like one, some guys don't need to change how they move, which I think is important as well. Reed comes from a dying era when you had 6'9" post-up bigs. He's like the last of a dying breed, and so he has to change. It's just the fact of the matter. He's a McDonald's All-American. He didn't make it to the league. Okay, that's fine. Let's take a shot at it now. Let's really get ourselves in a position to be the best player we can be. But we know that the way you moved previously, seeking out contact with a wide base, initiating from wide to narrow, or even probably wide to wider, isn't very operable in the NBA. You got to be much, close your footwork and you go from narrow to wide versus wide to wider. And what you said there is a great example with these guys. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it, if we do want some change and we're in a competitive basketball setting, if you have a little brother, I have an older brother, there's no way my older brother would quote unquote work on a hip flip and let his little brother beat him in basketball. There's not a chance in hell. He would just cheat. He would just physically, the emotional connection to basketball is too high. In the same way that we have certain things we really care about, maybe, I don't care what it is. It's amygdala attached. So it's attached to your personal identity as a person, which is why some people get mad about, whether you're talking about religion, politics, or the back squat. You have certain people that will, die on a certain hill, which is totally fine. But if I'm trying to have someone do something different, it probably shouldn't pick the thing that they're willing to die on the hill for. And so maybe doing this movement, which occurs in basketball, if we were just willing and open enough to do it, not in basketball is a better option, because if we did in basketball and they start losing, they're just going to put me right into the ground and they'll just dunk on me and they'll say, well, you're not this. And it's like, okay, well, we kind of defeated the purpose of this drill. Versus we play a Frisbee. No one associates being a professional Frisbee player together. We're just playing with a Frisbee. So we both suck at the Frisbee. We're not very good at the Frisbee, and you're not a professional Frisbee player, and I'm not a professional Frisbee player. We're just going to run around and try and catch a Frisbee. So now you're doing the movement patterns, but with none of that psychological association of it being, if I don't catch this, maybe my contract, I will look worse as a player or whatever. Okay. Like, I get why that's the case when you're playing a game. And these are conversations we have too when you go to open gyms and practices in certain areas where you're trying to develop your game. That's a very tough conversation. You say, you're going to an open gym and we're going to go play against some guys who aren't very good. We'll play against some guys who are some D2 college players. When you come and you're working on your 3-point shot, shoot a 3 every single time. I know you're going to want to post up, and when we're losing, you'll want to post up and dunk on somebody. I know that. But no one here is going to sign you to the NBA. If you scored 1 million points, no one's going to take you to the league. And if you scored no points, no one's going to take away your contract. You're strictly here to get better. Versus then you go and play in a situation where you don't have that mindset and you're constantly just trying to win. There's no way you're going to explore a new movement pattern that you're not as good at, because you're always going to default to your level of ability. So, Jared, I assume you played basketball. Lucas, I don't know. I assume you guys play basketball, have played sports, obviously. Basketball, I assume, yes? Is that?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
Okay, cool. I suck with my left hand. I've broken my wrist so many times. If you put me in a high competition game, there's a 0% chance I shoot anything with a left-hand runner. Like there's like a 0% chance. If I played against a bunch of guys who stink, I've played games entirely lefty. So you need to develop your skill relative to your competition. So if my left hand is at the caliber of a third grader, well, I should play against third graders working on my left hand. I don't need to just dominate with my right. And so you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish. And so if I'm trying to work on a certain skill and there's this factor of emotion getting in the way of it, I'm just going to dominate and do my right hand the whole time. Well, it's not going to make me any better. So then let's just get out of that and just play the Frisbee, if that makes sense.
Which is why you have to kind of have an understanding, like you said, of the pizza analogy. Everyone has a little bit different ingredient that they're going to prefer or that they need to play at a high level. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I have a question for you guys, I guess. Do you think like that there is, if something doesn't make you better at your sport and doesn't keep you healthier, is it a waste of time?
And doesn't keep you healthier?
Yeah. This is a question I struggle with. I sit there and look at it. It's like, look, this doesn't make them a better athlete. This doesn't make them healthier. What am I doing it for? And this is a question I sit there and look at my programming quite a bit. I was curious what you all thought about that. Because it's something where it's sometimes the addition of stuff is really a subtraction in theory, because you're at least having to adapt from it. Do you think that if something doesn't make you better and something doesn't make you healthier, does that exercise have any utility?
Yeah, so I did this a lot the last 2 years when I was with John. And one of our biggest things was doing what you just said. Do things that are going to make you better at your sport. Because like you said earlier, when I started to understand having conversations, understanding him as a person, understanding the athlete in front of me, was he didn't like the weight room like I did. He's not a meathead. He doesn't want to just be there for 2 hours. So why would I try to force him to do stuff that I wanted to do for an hour and a half? So what we did was just, hey, these are the main things we're going to do. And however long they take, that's how long it takes. So, like you said, we had sessions that were 20 minutes. We had sessions that were 45 minutes. We had 2 sessions. And that created a lot of buy-in. It created a lot of good results. And he started to feel a lot better, which then created him to be like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. Versus I think in the past, it's the model you talked about earlier that not everyone's fortunate enough to have that to where you could just train for 30 minutes and that's it for the day. Because if you go to a gym, they usually block out an hour and they charge you for that hour. So they're going to train you for an hour. They're going to do, battle ropes and random stuff at the end for 15 minutes because they don't have anything else to do. But yeah, I would agree with it. I mean, I think there's a level of things that we know as strength coaches that are important. For example, like John hated Copenhagen side planks. I knew they were important for him, so I'm going to get you to do those. But there's some things that I know don't have as much return on investment that I'm not going to do it. Like, we don't need to do this anymore.
It's a weird question because I think as coaches, I always tell my athletes, like, in the perfect situation, I don't exist. Like, you just know what I know. I wouldn't, if I trained myself, I'd just fight myself half the time. So I got to remember I'm training you. And we start off every day, like, what do you want to do in training? What is your plan? I am your chief performance officer. You're the CEO. You're the one who gets the dollars and checks, my guy. I'm the one who's your resource. And I think that's an interesting conversation because as coaches, I feel like when we're taught that our importance sits within our authority. Our ability to mandate an athlete to do something is a reflection of how good we are as coaches, that they don't question anything, that they don't ask anything, and we can get them in and out in an hour. That's a sign of a good coach. And the more I've coached people who've like lived at my house, who, play wiffle ball with my nephew, who are here as a part of my family, I go to their weddings, they come to my wedding. I almost said weddings, only one. But the idea is that you begin to realize they're humans. As silly as that sounds, as a coach, you're brought up like, this is how we're going to do things, and you're going to yell at people. I have 2 rules in my way. Well, 3. First one is respect my wife. You're at my house, pick stuff up. Otherwise, you'll never be able to come back. She's the queen bee. She'll kick you out of here before I do. Rule number 2 is you're not allowed to get mad. If we do something and you're frustrated when doing that something, that's fine because you pay me to help you get better. If we just did things you're really good at, what are we doing? You're wasting your money with me. And then number 3 is I want you to always realize that it's your decision. It's your input and your feedback. If you don't want to do something, we're not going to do something. Now, I will sometimes veto me doing something for them that they're like, we're going to do this. I'm like, well, yeah, you can do that on your own. I'm not doing that. As your advisor in this area, you can do it yourself. Like, your accountant's like going to say, look, maybe you shouldn't buy that Ferrari. So if you're going to do that, that's not under my advice. But that's kind of how this relationship goes. And it's about them. And it's unfortunate because as a coach, I was in a lot of different areas. I never asked a player, what do you want? Do you like this exercise? What are your favorite exercises? Do you enjoy that one? Do you think this one helps you? Is there certain things you want to learn that we do here that you like a little more or less? And then when you have those conversations, you realize how training, you're just a part of a team versus it being about you. And so often we're taught this. We're so important. We're going to have whistles and we're going to yell at people and we're going to be motivational. Like, these guys don't need motivation. I need motivation. I'm the lazy ass who didn't make it. Like, shit, like, I shouldn't be the one motivating you. That's why I found it interesting. And then when you bring that up, these conversations with, John, like, look, maybe we should do this or that, and this is more effective. It's something that I've encountered as well when you work with an athlete. It's like, oh, these guys are, they're humans. Why am I so stupid at times to make them do random shit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the biggest things I saw behind it was the intent that I get in movement. If a simple example of like a trap bar, like if he hated doing the trap bar and he just picks it up and puts it down. But if I know, hey, you love the trap bar, I could change the load, the intensity, the volume of the trap bar, and we could get different adaptations as we go. And I'll just use the trap bar. I don't need to do a back squat. If you hate back squat, like there's certain things I found with him that are going to drive intent, which are going to drive more results. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm here for. I don't, like you said, I don't want to be in the gym fighting and arguing with you to do whatever movement. If you hate doing that, I'll find something else. Now, I think there is a balance in our profession of, we do know what is good for you. And like you said, like, if you don't want to do this, let's have a conversation about it so I can get you to do it. And so, yeah, that's it's interesting. I would say it's more unique to our situations. I don't know how maybe your thoughts would be in a high school situation, because Lucas works a lot with youth, high school, college, where I think it might be a little different.
Yeah. I think asking them if they like stuff is very important.
Yeah.
I think, again, I've had a lot of coaches make us do stuff. We were in college and basketball team, and we didn't like the stuff they made us do, and we didn't try very hard. If you just let us do things we'd like, we'd probably do a lot more. So that's really helpful. I think another thing with youth athletes and even working like with pros has really been helpful is like, where do you feel that exercise? I think so often we just ignore that. Oh, we're going to do this because this is the pattern you should do. And you got to ask, do you feel that there? Because I do that exercise more times than not. We do a movement because we've experienced that movement, and we make the assumption that that movement's going to feel similar with that athlete. And we say, oh, I like the Bulgarian because it loads this or that. So I'm going to have them do the Bulgarian. But really, that person's doing it and their hip bothers them or whatever it might be. And they're just going through it because, oh, my coach told me this is what I should do. In the same way, if you're working with a youth setting or a high school setting, it's really I guess, again, there's no perfect answer because anytime you scale something, the minute you scale something, you lose individuality. There's a reason why when I buy a frozen pizza, it comes pre-made versus like I can go order a pizza when one guy's making it for me. Going back to the pizza reference again, because anytime you go at scale, you lose some individualness, which is innately a con, but also a pro because someone can have access to something that they wouldn't otherwise have access to if it wasn't scaled. And so, yeah, I think asking the athlete what they like, what they don't like is important. I think the athlete should be educated in an area. I mean, if you could possibly help them in a way, maybe this isn't feasible or reasonable. Just look, maybe it's a dad more times than not too, if you're dealing with high schoolers. What are you trying to accomplish? Why do you have so many activities in a day? And then there's going to be a natural standard error. So there's going to be a natural, not as perfect as it could be, and accepting that as part of it. Because I think it's silly to say this is like the perfect program for high school. Because anytime you go at scale, like my pizza is not perfect at scale. I can go to my favorite pizza place and order it and pay $35 and get the pizza I like, or I can spend $4 and get a frozen pizza. And they're not going to make it to how I like it. And whether it's me or, whomever it is in Alabama buying the same frozen pizza, we're going to get the same taste. And that's fine. It feeds me, does a good job. I like the pizza still. It's just the natural nature of economies of scale. And I think as humans, expressing that's important to people, like the parents. Why aren't you doing this and that? Like, look, dude, like you want that, you got to pay that. So that's kind of my long-winded, incomplete answer, I suppose.
I think from my perspective on it, because you mentioned I do work with a lot of youth in high school. Number one, baseline, you have to have a relationship with the athlete because then you can have informed conversations. So, and the other side of it is with youth and high school athletes, they don't know what they don't know. So sometimes it's like, no, we are going to do this because I do know that this is going to help you. Oh, hey, what do you want to do today? I want to do bicep curls. It's like, okay, well, we're going to do this, this, and this. And then here's why, and here's why. And they're like, oh, okay, then I do want to do that. But you have to have a relationship with them. And on the other side, you guys' context, it's way different working with pro athletes because it is a lot different. So working with an NFL receiver that I worked with for a couple of years, he was really, really in tune with his body. And he had very specific things that he liked and didn't like. But we were able to have that conversation, right? For instance, he really wanted to do a rear foot elevated, hand supported, barbell loaded split squat. And he felt that he got a lot out of it. Okay, so we did that. And we did that a lot. But to your point, Max, it's like, oh, I really want to do this. I'm like, I'm not going to be a part of that. So you can kind of make an informed conversation. Hey, let's do this instead because of this. Because he maybe wanted to do it because there was a specific thing he wanted to improve on. So we were able to have an informed conversation about plyometrics and speed and weight room. And then we were able to come up with almost like a program that we quote unquote, wrote together because he was really bought in with how he felt with his body. So we were able to just work together as opposed to, hey, I'm a dictator type, military instructor yelling at you and screaming at in your ear, hey, this is what we're going to do no matter what. this isn't the military. So he and I were able to develop a really good relationship and get good results because he was informed about his body and how he felt, and I understood that, and we worked together, and we got good results. You know, as opposed to a high schooler or a youth athlete, no, I'm going to tell you we're going to do this because I know it works, and you don't know what you don't know. So I think it just kind of depends on the athlete.
Yeah, I think that's completely a fair take. And then every athlete's different. Like AJ, who I work with, he interned under me for his last class. He had a project. He's like an exercise phys major. And like there's a picture of him walking in through the tunnel, reading the book Move by Rob Gray. It's hilarious. He's like going to the Bucks pregame dressed. He's carrying the Rob Gray book Move. So certain athletes are very inclined in that way. And so that's a good thing and a bad thing because sometimes they're so inclined. You're like, okay, well, let's not worry too much about that.
Right.
But with anyone I work with, the single message I try to get across as someone who works with a pro is I'll take a pie chart and I'll just draw a big circle. Say, look, like what percent of your career success would make up the biggest slice of this? And whatever that is, you're going to do that the most. For some people, that's not lifting weights. For some people, it is. And the minute that athlete has direction and definition, the minute the team can start to work as a team. And I think there's a natural unknownness. Like, I don't know what exercises work best. I got no idea. I have some ideas. Like, I have probabilities. I have a confidence level, 90% likelihood that this is a good exercise. There's a 10% chance it could suck. But I don't know. And so we just try and do our best and potentially make mistakes along the way. And as long as we're constantly evaluating stuff, I think there's a good opportunity to catch a mistake earlier than later. But with that being said, it's we got to have some level of like extreme humbleness, because if I knew the right exercises, like I love my pro athletes, I'd be a pro. Like, forget you guys.
Seriously.
I tell them that all the time. I said, look, dude, if I knew exactly how to do this, I wouldn't be training your ass. My ass would be in the league, and you guys would be watching me play. But I don't. And I don't know the perfect situations. I read a lot and I study a lot and we try. The more collaboration we have, the better I think our outcome is going to potentially be, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that makes complete sense. I wanted to switch gears slightly, maybe to kind of finish up here. And something we've talked about on this podcast, what we like to talk about is kind of a little bit more of like the business side. I know you've gone from, I think, resilience. Is that what it's called in Colorado?
Yeah. Resilience code.
You went there. And then, you know, at least what I've followed is you've got EdgeU now, you have Upper Echelon you're part of, you have your online that you do, and then you also have your private, which I might be missing some stuff. But, you know, I guess just a little bit into the business. Why did you go that route? How do you like it? Do you know, just a little bit on the business side of like what you're doing now and how that is different maybe than what, you know, traditional strength coaches do or what you did in the past.
I think I start with what would be my perfect world. And I'm not interested in big fancy things. I live in Iowa. I don't have a huge house and I'm pretty cheap bastard. I don't know the last time I bought some tights the other day that were $30 because my ones from college that are nine years old ripped finally. I'm actually, ironically, this is hilarious. I'm wearing my elite socks, the elite socks from college hoops. They're my team color still. I'm 30 years old. So the things that are 9 years old and just got a hole in them. I'm kind of pissed about it. So I'm not a huge money guy. I know money makes things less stressful when money isn't the center of it all, whether it's putting food on the table or making sure we can overcome certain obstacles. But I love training people. So in the perfect world, I would just be not having to worry about the finances and just train people and explore things I like. I like to learn. I like to learn about calculus and physics and weird things like that. I'm kind of frustrated I'm not as good at it as I'd like to be. And so that's kind of my perfect world. And then I step back and say, well, how can I get as close to that? And in that perfect world, there doesn't sound much of like a 9 to 5 in there. I hate working past 5 p.m. I really love my wife and she gets done at work at 5 p.m. And so I want to hang out with her. And that's why I married her, because she's my friend. And so I want to be there when she's home versus working. And so if I can make less money and do that, I'd be happily able to do so. But luckily, I've been blessed in the situation where I got lucky and people enjoyed some of my Instagram content. And it's only been of late that I've been trying to be better at the business side of it. I've kind of just defaulted and just kind of taken what Instagram's given me, which has been very generous in regards to attention. But I made a newsletter now. Oh my God. Yeah. Plug my newsletter. You can sign up to that. Because I had a website and I didn't really enjoy that a ton, but I wanted something to have a creative outlet. So I'm trying to do a newsletter and I might hawk some sales at people in there, but who knows? And so very long story short, because I kind of just went on a weird tangent rant, but that's how I got to what I want to do. So you understand like what you really want to do with your life and kind of look at it. And then the rest of the stuff, you can work towards achieving that. If I wanted big fancy cars and other things, I probably would do other stuff. I probably wouldn't train people, probably sell some like houses or something, but you get the idea. And so then I have different, because I'm self-employed, you have different levels of stuff that you need to think about doing, because at any given moment in time, Instagram might end or a certain business might go under. You might lose clients day to day for running an online training team. And that can be very stressful. And that's one thing I don't like about this is the constant on in this. You have to be constantly be engaged if you are running purely through social media and online. And so that's kind of frustrating, but it's also fun because it's always tactical and trying to develop new stuff. So with that in mind, because I can't determine which of these things is going to be most successful, with my time being scaled across different areas, like if I only have 6 hours or 3 hours or 5 hours to work, instead of only working on one thing, I think that doing a diversified portfolio is probably a smarter option. So I do my in-person stuff. That in-person stuff can feed the training stuff. That training stuff can feed some of the educational stuff. So we have some workflow there that goes into the newsletter. So that's a very repurposed, or not repurposed, but workflow-based material. It's not like I'm trying to, do 3 different random careers. They're 3 very connected careers that kind of facilitate each other. So with that being the case, you never know which one of those is going to be the most successful. And so, which is why you can always take free information or free platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, and utilize those and leverage yourself, because you can collect audience engagement and understanding is what people enjoy. And then from there, you begin to stratify. This is like a thing I can immediately make money from. If I really had to, I could just take on more in-person clients. I would train high schoolers or whatever, and I would sacrifice my past 5 p.m. time. But if I really had to, I could. If I wanted to do speaking engagements, you could. So you have like all these levers you can pull if you get in a pickle. And then you have like your big ideas, which are like the upper echelon stuff is a very exciting one. That's a big company we're working on. But those things don't come into fruition day one, versus like you sell a program, you're going to have money in your pocket day one. Something like upper echelon requires time for it to mature and get to a certain point where it can be at the level you'd like it to be. So you have to have then other things operating at other time scales, such as the medium and long-term stuff. And so that's kind of how the whole platform is set up. I can sell an immediate program today. I can have a team. I can have an educational stuff. I can have the long-term hopes and wishes. I have other subsidiary levers that I can pull if I ever get in a pickle. And then you can always get a job as well. You can work 9 to 5. And so there's lots of options. There's lots of things you can pick and choose. That's kind of how I think about the business acumen or portfolio of work. And what we as coaches struggle to do is there's actually a lot of content consumers. There's not many creators, actually. We suck at creating stuff. We're like uncomfortable in front of cameras. Not you guys. Look at this setup. This is Hollywood right here. I shouldn't talk in an all-encompassing way, but sometimes we struggle at being on camera. And so always remember that 100 people following you is 100 people you never would engage with otherwise. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. 1,000 people. Sometimes you see these numbers, 2,000, 200,000, 2 million followers. Don't worry about that. Just worry about building your current situation. Because when I start a newsletter, it starts off very small and it has to grow and mature in the way other things do. But if I just only had Instagram and had all my followers there and then didn't, find a way to connect them in other webs of interest where they get a lot of value from, because that's always the key, is how can they get value, because they'll stay engaged with me. Then they can Yeah, I'm not subject to only one situation being my end all, my linchpin essentially of performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's huge because I think there's a lot of young strength coaches that listen to this podcast, and I think that's what I've tried to get across, because what you just explained is similar to kind of what I'm working on now that I'm moving forward in different avenues. But I think a lot of strength coaches go to school, get their degree, get the CSCS, and then just jump into a job for 50 years doing the 9 to 5, training clients at colleges or high schools or whatever, which is great for them. But the understanding that there's like a whole nother side that you could do if you just put your time in and put the energy into it and effort into it. It all depends on what you want to do. It's not just you have to be a strength coach at a high school or college in order to be a trainer. I think a lot of young strength coaches get caught up in that. And so, yeah, man.
Time's a bitch, man. Like, it really is, not to interrupt you, but like, you only got so much of it. Make money while you sleep, make money while you don't work is the best way you can do it. But I think too often coaches think that they have to make a career instantaneously doing that. Like, look, if you train an athlete, that's great. But you can take the time of training that athlete, especially in this media sphere that we're in now. That athlete likes to be reposted. They want to share your content. I had a conversation with someone who's local recently. They're like, oh, what should I do? Blah, blah, blah. I said, look, your athletes want to be on TikTok. Film them doing the exercise, tag them, let them reshare it. Because you know who's going to see that? Your entire training demographic. Local athletes that follow that athlete are going to see that. And so I'd rather have 1,000 people who buy my stuff, who follow me, than 100 million people who don't give a shit about me. And that's just the fact of the matter. And so people get so caught up. I've talked to some of these businesses in the area, and it just drives me bananas. Like, you don't need 100,000 followers. You need every 10,000 people to follow you here. And that's the key aspect of it if you're a localized individual, because the minute you have an inertia behind your name, then you can start to think about scale, group training, camps, all this other stuff. Then you have group training, camps, what skill acquisitions you have there, where you've learned how to run groups and learn how to run camps. You can teach other coaches how to do that. You can share that process along the journey on YouTube, whatever social media is, that business side of it. So now you have a tree and you start to build branches off that tree versus you're entirely trying to plant seeds everywhere and just grow 9 trees. That requires a lot of water to do, a lot of time versus, the scalability. So I don't want to interrupt. Sorry, Lucas, but that's kind of like Jared piggybacking on what you said.
No, that's great. I wanted to ask you, in relation to the business side, what's something that you did wrong or a mistake that you made or something that you did, I don't know, 6 years ago or whatever?
What haven't I done wrong is a good question.
Done better.
Golly.
Sure.
Yeah, I actually bumped into someone the other day. She was training at the gym, and I filmed. We were a small Quad City. So if someone's in the gym filming themselves at like 10 a.m., you're obviously a fitness somebody, right? Not just like at a gym on a Tuesday randomly. You should be in school or in college. So I talked to the person. They said, oh, I'm a trainer here, but I'm building a social media platform. I said, let me give you some advice right off the bat, because I screwed up a lot of times. First off, number one is social media will love you, and hate you cyclically. Don't get caught up in that. Don't get caught up in your entire eggs being put in the does social media like me basket, because then you'll be caught in the Liver King cycle of trying to do more and more things to capture eyes. You want to capture and you want to sustain, capture and retain. And what I mean by that is there's 3 things under that umbrella. One is you want to capture without effort. So can I post the same thing on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram? I get eyes on the same bit of information, because you don't know which one of those 3 platforms it might go more viral on, or even YouTube Reels. And it might not go viral at all. You might get very minimal. The area I made a mistake on was really bad at retaining. I should have made a newsletter 6 years ago. I didn't. My dumbass. I don't even send people emails. I'm an idiot. So I'm trying to do that now. I thought it'd be a good idea to make a podcast before that, like a dipshit, because which one thing takes like an hour and a half 3 times a week, and the other one takes like 15 minutes to send a stupid email. And one's actually way more enjoyable, the email is, because I get to sit there and edit it versus like, oh, I got to bring my A game for an hour and a half to make a podcast. So stupid me. Not understanding like basic business practices, because you kind of caught in the moment. And then understanding it's a longitudinal game. So as you do that, you might have a huge spike and you might go viral. You might go, oh my gosh, I got all these followers, and you're making X amount of money or whatever retention on this stuff this year. remember that's this year. So if you live your lifestyle in regards to that 1 year, you're going to be really putting a lot of pressure to sustain that. You got to have a certain level of what you need to live and operate in, what certain aspects go to your business, and then what certain things are like found money, basically, what's found treasure here. And so understanding that is really important, because then you're not going to get caught up. I've seen people get really frustrated. And what I mean by not even like the lifestyle, the financial gain you might get from it, but in terms of expectations. Oh, I used to have, 20,000 people watch my videos and only 9,000 watch. I'm done posting. Like, whoa, if you had 4,000 and now it's 9,000, you'd be pretty excited. Like 9,000 is a lot of people still. Yeah, you're still in the hunt. Like, I wouldn't stop now. Just think about how you can reevaluate to make stuff more engaging. And so those I would capture across Twitter, I'd capture across TikTok, I'd capture across Instagram, I'd capture across YouTube Reels, anything else in between. Always being aware of new trends is really important too. And there's certain platforms. I was late on TikTok like an idiot. My friend texted me 3 years ago, hey, do this platform, it's going to blow up. Okay, dude, I don't want to dance on there. Now I'm posting stupid TikToks trying to catch up on a sphere I totally missed out on. And then, not being afraid, lastly, to actually engage with people, like talk to people, find your way, put yourself out there, because at the end of the day, you have to put forth an effort to communicate with people in person and communicate with people online and have a presence. And you're going to do things you're not going to like always, and not going to have huge returns, but you got to keep trying. So that's kind of, it was much quicker than that conversation was when I talked to the person in the gym. I gave him a very summed up version of that. But the biggest takeaway is like, look, if you want to go on social media, like there might be times that likes you, you might get really popular, and then that no longer works anymore and people don't give a shit about you. Like, don't give up. That's so silly to do. Just make sure you find ways to retain people in a proper way.
Like, you're always an athlete online program. How is that? Like, why did you make that? How is that doing?
That's a fun program, man. Because I don't like lifting weights like a power lifter. I like to play basketball. I like to be an athlete. I like plyos. I just sit there and I think about stuff, and even just life in general. You know how many guys you see in the weight room who are jacked who probably would die if they ran 2 laps? Like, totally. It's just like it's a risk factor for them to run. And you're kind of like, what purpose is that serving? I don't want to be, hey kids, I can't chase that fly ball. I got to squat tomorrow. I want to be able to play basketball. I like playing pickup. I want to be athletic. I've always wanted to dunk a basketball. I couldn't dunk in high school. I couldn't dunk in college. I grabbed the rim for the first time 2 hands my senior year. I thought it was so cool. I actually read Verkhoshansky's books about drop jumps, and I was in season. We weren't allowed to do plyos, but I was sneaking in and doing drop jumps. And all of a sudden I could grab the rim with 2 hands. I was like, wow, this is awesome. Some guy who's ground bound his whole life. This is pretty cool. And then I started to get more athletic, and then I can dunk a basketball. And I was like, this would have been so cool. But you know what? It's cool still to be able to do this. I can play with my athletes. I get to play with professional basketball players. I'm not one, but I get to play with them and move out there. And so the Always an Athlete team is like, look, dude, I don't like squatting for volume. I don't like doing RDLs for volume. I don't like being sore in my legs. I like to run fast and jump high. I think that's really fun to do. And that doesn't require tons of metabolic breakdown. But I also like to have like some delts and a bicep vein here and there. And I like to be able to bench press a lot and have some dope pecs, because when I go to the beach, I'm all about show and no go in my upper body. And I'm all about all go and no show in my lower body. Because let's be real, like that's the coolest way to do it. And so the Always an Athlete team is based on like very loose programming I use in my pros. I call it like the programming that you should do, not the programming I do. I do a lot of stupid stuff trying to figure stuff out. But the Always an Athlete team is really much scaled to people who are like an intermediate athlete who want to try stuff out. And I always tell them, look, if you don't like an exercise, don't do it. Like if you're not comfortable doing a drop jump, don't do it. Please don't do a drop jump if you're not comfortable, for the love of God. Or just do like a in-place pogo or a really small box. Obviously, because it's at scale, it can't be made for every single person. But we've had people who are 45 message me and go, look, dude, I've never been able to move like this. I thought I couldn't move anymore. I got your program and I kind of modified it for myself. And now I'm like more athletic than I was when I was like 25. And I see these old people running sprints. And there's a guy at my gym who follows me. I'll leave his name out of it, but he's 67, I think, 65. And he's like trying to touch the rim. He's like, I follow your stuff and I love it. And like, he's running sprints out there. And he's like, look at all these old guys in here. He's like, they probably couldn't even run if they across the street if it was pouring out to save their life. He's like, I'm out here sprinting. The dude's kind of got wheels too. He's like, I was never an athlete, but I love mountain biking and I love rebounding for my son. And now I am hopping around over here on one foot, and I'm able to do that just fine without being worried that if I fall, I'm going to break a hip and be done for. And I was like, that's like the whole purpose of this. And so I kind of looked around like no one's really programming like this. There's certain aspects of it that you can see. Some people do, they call it athlete programming, but they don't ever program sprints, and they program still lots of volume for their legs. And I was like, no, I'm just going to literally take what my athletes kind of do and put it at scale to where I'd be comfortable if I was 30 years old doing it versus like a professional hooper doing it. And we have, barefoot preps and rhythm movements and hops and skips and things I wish people, I think, would get so much more out of it if they did that in their own training. Because people more times than not, like, look, like they're probably married and they're not trying to train to go like hit up the club and look great and just be super swole and, move like an Rubik's cube. You'd rather be like limber and lean and able to move around like you'd want to, because you want to be on a moment's notice, go play pickup with your friends versus needing 7 weeks in advance to get ready. So that's kind of the origin of why I made the programming the way it is. And then, I kind of matured from there essentially.
And it's cool because you made it its own little business, right? But it's something you were passionate about. It's a problem that you wanted to solve. And then you're able to, monetize it in a certain way, being creative online, which there's a lot of coaches that I think could take, some advice from that. You know what I mean? So it's like, find something that you're passionate about and figure out a way to create value for people that would take that and use that in their life, which I think is a big takeaway.
And to add that too, especially the online aspect, people go, oh, well, that exercise, that's a silly exercise. That looks like a gimmick. I said, look, first off, it's one of 9 exercises we do today. So if I'm going to do 9 exercises, and I find there is value in band rhythm squats, I love them. Absolutely. But what the hell do you think people are going to watch more? A band rhythm squat or someone front squat for the 900,000th time?
Exactly.
Like, seriously, like, I'm being honest. Like, yeah, it's part of my program. It is not the linchpin of the program, but it's going to at least get someone into the door. And if they like it, because it's a 7-day free trial, they can stick around. There's no money up front. And so someone's like, oh, that's a gimmick. Well, if my whole program was doing banded rhythm squats, I'd probably agree with you. That's a gimmick. But if I can post an exercise from today's workout, I'm going to probably pick one that looks cooler. It's still in the workout, but if I'm going to go and put the pastries in my shop on the window, I'm going to pick the ones that look good to put in front. What's the Dwight Schrute one? You put the best beats in front, right? That's the same concept for my program. I put the stuff people like in front. Like, yeah, if you don't like the programming, you don't need to pay for it. It's just free trial. It's pretty simple.
I think that's just creative marketing. And marketing may not be the right term, but it's just a creative way to get your product out there to more eyes.
Yeah, it was straightforward.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and chat about just anything. So appreciate you being an open book.
Of course, man. I'll put this in my newsletter.
There you go.
Oh yeah, and I mean the last thing would be plug away all your stuff. You got. I don't want to name it for you, so you just plug.
But yeah, I've been doing the newsletter because it's more centrated. You can check my stuff out on there, and I'll give you guys a link that people can sign up to. It's useful stuff. It's cool stuff. I put different videos that I don't share because Instagram doesn't let me share 5 times a day. Otherwise, it caves your viewership. So there's a lot of stuff I filmed that I don't get to post anywhere that frustrates me, so I can put it there. I have EdgeU, which is my educational website. I try and break down science in a very understandable, applicable way. We have a bunch of courses on there. It's $30 a month. It's dirt cheap for what you get on there. I have so many hours of content on there. We have 9 courses, maybe 11 at this point. Myself and Paul Fabritz put that together. So if you want to check that out, it's a great place to go dig into information. We have courses and freeform content. If you like lifting weights and you want to be kind of, a little more jacked and athletic, check out the Always an Athlete team. Hop on it. I'm on the message board. It shows up as a text on my phone. So people ask me questions. It's instantaneous. I think I have the highest response rate of all time. I do the upper body programming. I do the programming. I'm not this week I'm just going to throw random stuff on there. Every night I sit there and I go through my programming. It is an active ordeal. It is not just this copy and paste. If people don't like stuff, I listen to that. It's great to have feedback. So I make it for people, not for myself. I'm not doing that for my health. I'm doing it for people to enjoy. And then obviously, I think those are the 2 main. Oh, Upper Echelon. Yeah. With subs, protein. We didn't talk about it, but if you guys like good supplements that are very good supplements, check out Upper Echelon. We have protein, we have collagen, Just go check it out. I can give you the whole laundry list of great stuff we have that you can use Strong by Science to get a discount code. And we probably have a discount code on there when you first time buy anyway. So go check it out. Upper Echelon. I take the protein. Most protein kind of makes you like poop your pants. Like if you guys ever had like the pre-workout protein, you kind of chug it down. And next thing you know, you're like 15 minutes and you're like, oh gosh, that's a bad decision. Never had that with Upper Echelon. I've had that protein literally before my workouts, sometimes during it. Not an issue. I think it's the simplicity of the ingredients in it. We don't have like any fillers. Some other proteins might have some fillers that maybe upset your stomach. You can debate about that all you want, sure, whatever. Point is, I haven't had any issues. We've had people review it, say they don't have issues. And the collagen, by the way, is the best tasting collagen I think out there. So you can try that too if you want. Enough plugging away. So
I appreciate it. I'm on EdgeU. I have Upper Echelon, so I have all these things. So I can vouch for you and all the businesses you have that they're top notch and that they're affordable, which I think is unique. The EdgeU could be worth a ton of money. It's like a master's degree for people that are out there. Like you could break it down. But no, I appreciate your time, man. Take the time to coming on. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate you all.